The story begins with the fact that since ancient times, people have longed to possess superpowers in order to have an advantage over others. And in the 20th century, a meteorite suddenly fell near the South Pole and scientists immediately extracted matter from its surface. With the help of this matter, it became possible to awaken superpower and hidden abilities in people, and it was called the Pulse of the Dragon. Research work on this topic was carried out in top secret, and when using the dragon's pulse, the hidden capabilities of a person were revealed, and this gave them limitless power. But at the same time, the use of this power could begin to corrupt people and awaken the worst qualities in them, and people who got out of control would lose their minds. They became killing machines and destroyed everything around them, and it was scary to imagine how much trouble a crowd of such monsters could bring. And the guy read that not long ago the Dragon's Pulse was lost, and the security agency League of Free Warriors and the underground Chinga sect were trying to find it. The guy read about all this news and was shocked. He couldn't believe this Dragon Pulse because to him it sounded like something from a manhwa. And then suddenly he received a message from Master Lu in which he gave the task to go to Tianhai and protect the carrier of the Dragon Pulse. The guy was very surprised because he noticed that this task was level C, and he realized that he needed to take on this matter. Xiang Yang immediately wrote to Master Lu that he would take on this matter, and the master told him that he would send him the exact address a little later. And then, when Xiang Yang was corresponding with the master, his mother suddenly called him and she had good news for her son. Xiang Yang told his mom that he couldn't talk because he was on the subway, and she asked if he had time and said that she had found a great girl for him. Xiang Yang was not happy about this news and asked his mother if she really wanted to arrange a date again and said that he was very busy. But his mother said that she didn't want to hear anything and said that no matter what, today Xiang Yang will only go on a date. Xiang Yang entered the subway car and said that he had work and he really couldn't go there today because he himself didn't want to go there either. But suddenly his mother yelled at him and asked if he knew what it cost her to organize this, and asked him not to anger her anymore. Xiang Yang listened to his mother and said that he understood her, and they were supposed to meet at the Chongzhua Hotel, and he said that he would be there in the evening. But then suddenly Xiang Yang was distracted from the conversation because he noticed that something was happening in the subway and was very surprised by it. And then suddenly Xiang Yang noticed that some strange man was pestering the girl and came too close to her, almost right. The girl thought that this man was a freak and realized that there was no crush there, but he openly pressed himself against her and was a pervert. And then suddenly a strange man stretched out his hand and green smoke began to come from there, and the girl standing didn't see anything at that moment. The man thought that it was very good that it was he who found the carrier of the Dragon's Pulse, since he had been looking for this target for a long time. He couldn't wait to present it to his master and thought that his master would be very pleased and would reward him. But suddenly, Xiang Yang immediately approached the strange man and squeezed his hand with all his might. The man didn't understand who this guy was and what he was doing. But unexpectedly, Xiang Yang immediately dealt a powerful blow to this scoundrel's face and thought that he got what he deserved for his action. The strange man immediately fell to the ground and began screaming in pain, and all the people in the carriage looked in surprise at this strange man. Xiang Yang said that the animal just got what it deserved and was punished for the fact that he did not hesitate to approach such a cute girl. The girl immediately turned to Xiang Yang and thanked him for protecting her from this scoundrel because she couldn't have done it without him. Xiang Yang smiled and said that it was just trifles and he was glad to help her in difficult times, and it was not difficult for him. But then suddenly, at the time of their conversation, the train suddenly slowed down as it had already reached its station and people were warned to prepare to disembark. The strange man immediately managed to get up and told Xiang Yang that he was a bastard and ruined all his plans, and said that he would soon pay for it. Due to the sudden stop of the train, Xiang Yang suddenly collided with this girl and was very surprised by this because he was not prepared for this. The strange man took advantage of the moment that Xiang Yang was immobilized and quickly ran out of the carriage and disappeared into the crowd of people. Xiang Yang suddenly fell directly on this girl and they landed on the ground. She was in a lot of pain because Xiang Yang was heavy. She immediately stood up and told Xiang Yang that he was a freak and immediately slapped him in the face and asked how he could do such a thing. She started to leave there and told Xiang Yang that she took him for a good and kind guy and he turned out to be another pervert. Xiang Yang sat on the floor and thought that people did not understand when he did good, and he always received such blows from people for his kindness. 2 hours later, Xiang Yang arrived at the Chongzhou Hotel and immediately called his mother and said that he was already there and was waiting for her arrival. Xiang Yang looked at the table and wondered if his mother was mocking him and made him a date with this sitting woman. Xiang Yang looked at her and wondered if their family had suddenly gone bankrupt and impoverished and they wanted to sell him to a rich lady. Xiang Yang thought that this was too much and how could his mother do such a thing, and did she really not think at all about the feelings of her own son? And then, when Xiang Yang was talking about this terrible date, his phone began to vibrate and ring because he had received a message. And when Xiang Yang took out his phone, he noticed that he had received a message from Master Lu and thought that it's good, at least he got the task. And then Xiang Yang approached the girl and said that he thought that they were not suitable for each other and that he now had work to do and had to run away. Xiang Yang said regarding the lunch, he asked her to let him pay for this lunch and thanked her for coming there. But then suddenly someone from the side sprinkled water from a glass at Xiang Yang, and it was very strange because there were no friends there. Xiang Yang, doused with water, froze in bewilderment and could not understand what it was and wondered whether he deserved such a punishment for this. Xiang Yang was very angry and he shouted and asked who could have done this and said that the pest would immediately get what he deserved. But then suddenly a girl from the subway appeared in front of him and asked what he allowed himself, and he didn't take dating seriously. She said that he could have done better not to come if he didn't even have the courage to tell her everything to her face, and then she froze in surprise. The girl clearly recognized him and Xiang Yang also froze in surprise and asked her if she was on the subway today and how could everything coincide like that. Xiang Yang called her a crazy hysterical and she called him a shameless pervert, and they began to quarrel and sort things out among themselves. She told Xiang Yan to let him know that her name was Lu Xingran and she didn't find herself in a garbage dump, and told her friend Xiao Tseng to go from there. Lu Xingran began to leave from there, and upstairs some man asked the girl in a whisper if she understood who he meant. Xiang Yang asked Lu Xingran to stand and not leave there and listen to him, and the unfamiliar girl said that she would do everything right. Xiang Yang asked if she was Lu Xingran and said that he mixed everything up and that's why an uncomfortable situation arose and he was not to blame. Lu Xingran said that she couldn't stand people like him, and did he really think that since he had money, he could treat other people like trash? Xiang Yang approached her and said how could he know that it was she who was Lu Xingran, and he asked her for forgiveness for his actions. Xiang Yang told her that besides, he really had things to do now, and showed her his phone so that she would finally believe him. Lu Xingran looked at the phone and realized that it was true and thought maybe she was mistaken about him and hurried. But suddenly, at the time of their conversation, someone called Xiang Yang and said that she didn't believe her eyes and missed him. And then suddenly a girl ran up to him and wanted to hug him. Xiang Yang was surprised and asked her who she was. She asked if he really didn't remember her and said that he recently ordered her private dance in the den and how could he forget it. Xiang Yang remembered this and thought that it was bad because it was part of the task and Lu Xingran might have misunderstood everything. Xiang Yang was shocked and immediately turned around and asked Lu Xingran to explain everything to her and said that it was not what she was thinking about now. But suddenly Lu Xingran hit Xiang Yang in the face with all her might and said that she didn't want to hear any excuses from him. Xiang Yang was in pain because he received another slap in the face and thought that everything seemed to be against him and he had always been unlucky in life. Lu Xingran asked him what he wanted to explain and said that everything was clear with him and she knew guys like him through and through. Lu Xingran ended the conversation and told her friend Xiao Tseng that it was time for them to leave there and quickly return to Tianhai. Xiang Yang thought that he couldn't waste time on her now because now the most important thing was the task, and the girl winked at the guy. The stranger immediately took the radio and said that everything was done and now Lu Xingran was returning to Tianhai and they were ready. The interlocutor told the stranger that he understood him and would report this to the owner, and they absolutely had to grab her as quickly as possible. After these events, at night Xiang Yang walked on the street and went to carry out a task. He thought about all the events that happened to him. Xiang Yang thought that he had a hard day and at first he completely screwed up on a date and now he has wandered into an unknown place. Xiang Yang was thinking how he could rectify the situation and apologize to Lu Xingran because he was to blame, but suddenly he stopped immediately. Xiang Yang looked around and wondered if it was a school, thought that Master Lu must have sent him the wrong address of some school. Xiang Yang called him and asked if the address was correct, and Master Lu said that their client wanted him to sneak into the school and protect their principal. And then suddenly, during a telephone conversation, Xiangyang heard some sounds coming from the school and something was happening there. The hooligans threatened the police and said that if they continued to kick, he would break their legs and hurt them very much. And then one of the hooligans approached the policewoman and told her that she was the very sweetest and most beautiful girl of all. The bully asked her to let her uncle kiss her and not resist it if she wanted to remain safe and sound in the end. But suddenly Xiangyang ran in there and delivered a powerful kick to the bully's face, immobilizing him and knocking out the villain. The bully immediately fell to the ground and all his people were very surprised at how strong Xiangyang was that he knocked out their friend in one blow. Xiangyang smiled and said that he seemed to have underestimated this school and began to slowly head towards these evil scoundrels. And then Xiangyang dealt with all the hooligans in a matter of seconds and they all lay on the floor and could not move. The policeman asked Xiangyang to leave them and said that two people dressed in all black were heading towards the director's house and asked him to take care of it. But then Xiangyang remembered that Master Lu had asked him earlier in the day to complete the task and protect the director of school number 1 in Tianhai City. And now it became clear to Xiangyang which director Master Lu was talking about and he agreed with the police and went to help. At that time, one room in the building was on fire and the director was there and she had no idea that she was in such danger. People dressed in all black quickly entered this building and noticed that the lights were on and they realized that she was there. The bully looked at the accomplice and said that they had to act quickly because their owner was already all on his nerves. At this time, the director was taking a shower and did not know that the hooligans had already come for her and wanted to kidnap him and complete the task. But suddenly she heard some sounds outside and was surprised because she was alone at home and everyone else had long left the building. The director wanted to see what was going on there and, opening the door, asked if anyone was there and asked what they needed. The director thought it was strange because she heard some noise and then suddenly the same bully stood behind her. And then the director screamed at the entire building and she begged for help and told these scoundrels to quickly let her go on good terms. Xiangyang was shocked because he heard her screams and realized that it was the director screaming and she needed immediate help. Two robbers put the director in a huge bag and she said that it was stuffy there and asked to let her out of the bag. But then suddenly the robbers heard some noise in the corridor and thought what was happening there because there was no one in the building. And then Xiangyang burst into the room and froze in surprise when he saw the robbers who intended to brazenly kidnap the director. The robbers, seeing him, immediately decided to run out of the window and Xiangyang ordered them to stand and not move, but they quickly ran away from there. Xiangyang thought that it was very bad and he was a little late and now he needed to catch up with them and save the innocent director. Xiangyang immediately ran out through the window and got ready to chase the robbers so that they got what they deserved and were punished. At this time, the police grabbed the hooligans and ordered them to walk more actively and said that they had completely lost their fear and were doing evil. And then suddenly robbers in black clothes appeared in front of them and the bully got very scared and screamed at their sudden appearance. The hooligan could not understand what was happening there and where these strange people in black clothes with a bag in their hands came from. And then suddenly Xiangyang appeared in front of them and the bully screamed even louder in fear and the policeman also couldn't believe it. Xiangyang ran with all his might after the robbers and ordered them to let the director go, but they thought that Xiangyang would never catch up with them. The hooligan was very surprised and thought how they did it because they jumped from the 8th floor and ran further and he realized that they were not just hooligans. Xiangyang was surprised and realized that these robbers were very dexterous and easily performed complex movements and ran very quickly. Xiangyang noticed that they began to quickly climb over the long gate and were sure that they could easily escape from there. But suddenly Xiangyang ran up to the robbers and jumped and kicked them with all his might and the robbers could not believe their eyes. And then the bag with the girl slipped out of the hands of the robber and began to fall down. The girl couldn't understand what was going on there and begged for help. Xiangyang quickly ran to catch the bag because there were several meters there and she could have suffered from such a hard landing. Xiangyang instantly managed to grab the bag and he began to fall down along with this bag and hoped that nothing would happen to her. The robber at this time helped his accomplice to get out and told him that they screwed up again and failed this task again. Xiangyang landed on the ground and opened his eyes, froze in surprise and could not believe his eyes and he believed that fate exists. Suddenly Xiangyang noticed that Lu Xingran came out of the bag and asked Xiangyang if it was him again and what he was doing there. Lu Xingran demanded that Xiang Yang explain to her what he forgot there and why he followed her around, and Xiang Yang thought about the answer. Xiang Yang looked at Lu Xingran and wondered if it was her that he had to protect as part of the mission and thought that it was interesting. Lu Xingran was angry and shouted at him and said that she had already told him off and asked why he was still following her everywhere. Xiang Yang got angry and told her that he had just saved her and what she wanted from him, but Lu Xingran did not want to listen to him and said that he was a pervert. But then suddenly Commander Chen Mengqin intervened in their conversation and told them both to shut up because they were already giving them headaches. Xiang Yang and Lu Xingran were very surprised by such words and wondered who could say such words to them without any warnings. Chen Mengqin asked them who called them and asked them to tell about all the events that happened there in detail. And then a policewoman approached them and told the commander that it was she who called them and called them there so that they could sort it out. She said that these two hooligans attacked her and her colleague and threatened them. They tied them up and tried to kidnap their director. Commander Chen Mengqin listened to her and ordered her men to capture them all and then take the necessary punishment. The bully began to make excuses and said that they were not to blame, and in this situation they were also victims, and he did not lie to them. The hooligan approached the commander and said that they were forced to do this and said that during the day two kidnappers beat them and left them there. The hooligan told them about everything that happened and, showing his hand, said that then these robbers put this watch on their hands. The bully said that they said that if they don't help them kidnap the director, this watch will explode, and they were scared of this. Xiang Yang asked the hooligan if they knew who these kidnappers were, but the hooligan said that they did not know these people before. Commander Chen Mengqin, after listening to the bully, thought about the secret kidnappers and the watch and thought that it was very familiar. And then suddenly, Commander Chen Mengqin remembered and was shocked. She realized that it was them, and were they really back to their old ways? Chen Mengqin said that setting the explosive mechanism in the wristwatch was the handwriting of the Chinga sect, and it was clearly them. Xiang Yang was surprised to hear about this sect and asked what kind of Chinga sect it was and what they did because he had never heard of them. Chen Mengqin said that the Chinga sect was the largest division of the demonic order in Tianhai, and she thought that they were all extinct. The commander wondered if they were taking up the old case again, and Xiang Yang wondered why they tried to kidnap Lu Xingran. Commander Chen Mengqin asked the hooligan whether these robbers left behind other evidence or anything besides these watches. The bully asked if she was joking and said that he was not an investigator and did not know anything about the evidence, but he noticed something suspicious. And then suddenly the bully looked at Xiang Yang and said that this dude was extremely suspicious and no one was interested in what he forgot at school in the middle of the night. The bully pointed his finger at him and said that Xiang Yang fought like a kung fu master and also jumped from the 8th floor like robbers and didn't blink. Chen Mengqin said that it was really interesting and asked him who he was and what he was doing there in the middle of the night. Xiang Yang thought about what he should do because members of the League of Free Warriors were supposed to remain anonymous, and he thought about what to tell her. Xiang Yang said that he just played sports since childhood and nothing special, and he said that he ended up there because Xiang Yang said that the director was his girlfriend and they literally met today and fell in love with each other at first sight. But Lu Xingran started pushing him and asked him not to talk nonsense and said that no one fell in love with him and said that he was lying. Chen Mengqin said so that's it, and she didn't expect that the daughter of the chairman of the Union of Military Schools would have such a guy. Xiang Yang was very surprised and asked her if her father was the chairman of the Union of Military Schools, and Lu asked if he expected this. Chen Mengqin said that she thought it would be better for her to confirm this information with the chairman himself and immediately called him. Chen Mengqin greeted the chairman and asked him to tell him detailed information about a guy named Xiang Yang. But suddenly Chen was surprised and her father said that she had heard right, and he said that Xiang Yang was the boyfriend of her daughter Lu Xingran. And then Xiang Yang and Lu Xingran froze in surprise and wondered what the chairman had just told her and what he meant. And then Lu Xingran screamed and asked her father what he was talking about and said that Xiang Yang was not her boyfriend and where did he come up with this. The chairman asked his daughter Lu Xingran not to be capricious and just calm down and talk like well-mannered adults. Lu Xingran became even more angry at this and asked her dad not to say such things to her because she was already an adult woman. The father told Chen Mengqin that he wanted to meet Xiang Yang and asked her to bring him to him, and she immediately agreed with him. Xiang Yang was very surprised by this and thought why the chairman of the Union of Military Schools wanted to meet with him, and it was strange. Commander Chen Mengqin asked Xiang Yang to follow her and told the athlete not to leave her side and always stay close. After that, they quickly arrived at the Union of Military Schools of Tianhai City, and Xiang Yang thought that everything in this building was very cool. They took the elevator and Chen Mengqin said that they would soon be at the general staff and asked Xiang to behave well in front of the head. Xiang Yang said that he didn't even think that the general staff of the Union of Military Schools was underground and wondered why this was necessary. The commander said that the Union of Military Schools was the highest governing body of the River Order and told him the details. She said that the River Order was in a state of eternal war with the demonic, and of course the general staff had to be located in safety. They began to walk along the corridor, and standing in front of the door, Chen Mengqin said that this was the chairman's office and told him to go there. Xiang Yang entered the room and asked the chairman if he wanted to see him, and he told Xiang Yang that he had long wanted to meet him. The chairman said that he probably had a lot of questions for him, and he admitted that it was he who organized their acquaintance with Lu Xingran. Xiang Yang was surprised, and Chairman Lu Guanglin said that he had studied the files of many free warriors throughout the country and he became interested. Lu Guanglin told Xiang Yang that he had no equal in either strength or combat performance, and that is why he would guard his daughter. Lu Guanglin told Xiang Yang that he would ask him why he should guard his daughter and asked if he had ever heard of the Dragon Pulse. Chairman Lu Guanglin handed the documents to Xiang Yang and asked him to look at it, and Xiang wondered if it was the Dragon Pulse. Xiang Yang asked so it was not a fiction, and Lu Guanglin said that the Dragon Pulse is completely real and this is not some kind of fairy tale. Xiang Yang read that according to legend, 5,000 years ago a strange object fell from the sky and ancient people added parts of it to food and became stronger. In ancient books it was described that the pulse of a dragon could be found on objects that fell from the sky, and by eating it one could increase its power. Xiang Yang read this and asked what his daughter was doing there, and Lu said that initially he himself could not imagine that she would be drawn into this. A month ago, people gathered with Lu and said that the experiment was successful and they managed to extract the dragon's pulse. People were very happy about this and said that it would greatly help them in the fight against the rival demonic order. Chief Scientist Lu approached the girl volunteer Ellen and said that she would be the first and gave her a dragon pulse for an initial test. And then suddenly, having tested the pulse of the dragon, Ellen became very aggressive and told all the scientists that she would finish everyone off. Lu discovered that the dragon pulse not only increased strength but also corrupted the moral side and turned them into brutal murderers. The guy told the chairman that her state was similar to the same trance that members of the demonic organ fell into. Then Lu realized that the dragon pulse was the source of the origin of the demonic order, and he did not find a way to destroy the dragon pulse sample. And to be sure that it would not fall into evil hands, he decided to plunge it into a state of suspended animation and divide it into two parts, and one was kept by him and the other by Xingran. Lu Guanglin told Xiang Yang that he therefore had to act as her boyfriend and guard her 24 hours a day. Imagine asked Xiang Yang if he understood his words, and Xiang said that he understood his words perfectly and would never let him down. Xiang Yang began to leave the building and thought that he understood what he needed to do, but he did not know how it could be done. Xiang Yang thought that in order to protect Lu Xingran all the time, he had to live with her, but she couldn't stand him and hated him. Xiang Yang didn't know what to do now and thought that now he was ready for anything, and after that he rang the doorbell. Xiang Yang stood in front of Lu Xingran's house and asked the beauty to open the door and said that her beloved guy had come to her. Lu Xingran was surprised and thought who could come to her at such a time, because she was not expecting any guests today. Lu Xingran opened the door and asked Xiang Yang if it was him again and asked what he needed from her and why he came. Xiang Yang told her that her father really liked him and wanted him to live with her and protect her from all sorts of troubles and problems. Lu Xingran said that she didn't sign up for this and she didn't like it and immediately wanted to close her front door. But Xiang Yang held the door and asked her not to rush to drive him away and said that in fact he was a pretty good guy. Xiang Yang said that if she asked him about it, he could be a bad guy. Lu Xingran was very surprised by his words. Lu Xingran imagined this in her head and became very angry with Xiang Yang and thought that he was some kind of abnormal person. Lu Xingran immediately slapped him and said that he was a pervert and she didn't want to listen to all this nonsense anymore. Xiang Yang was very offended and wondered if he had received such a blow again and thought that he didn't say anything bad to her. And then suddenly a courier came to them and asked if they could put off their quarrel for now because he had delivered their order. Lu Xingran thanked the courier for such fast delivery and said that their service worked without problems and everything was super. The courier wished her bon appetit, and suddenly something about the courier alerted Xiang Yang and he seemed somehow strange to him. Lu Xingran told Xiang Yan that she was very tired today and she no longer had the strength to argue and quarrel with him over trifles. Lu Xingran told him to get out of there and never appear there again and immediately slammed the front door in his face. Xiang Yang was very upset and thought that Lu Xingran was a bitch because the chairman himself chose him and she was offended over trifles. Xiang Yang angrily said that one would think that he dreamed of being someone's security guard and said that he didn't need it for nothing. At this time, the same courier suddenly looked at Xiang Yang from the corner. He hid and did not make any sound so as not to be noticed. At this time, Lu Xingran was sitting and thought that Xiang Yang was a scoundrel and thought that since he was cute, he could harass everyone. Lu Xingran decided to try the delivered cake and thought that her dad was also great, and what did he see in this Xiang Yan? And then suddenly, having tried this cake, Lu Xingran became very ill and for some reason she felt dizzy and did not feel well. Suddenly she looked at the sweetness and realized that it was all about the cake and it looked like someone had added some kind of substance to it in advance. And suddenly, someone opened her front door and Lu Xingran got scared and asked who came to her at such a time. Lu Xingran could still barely see and she saw the same courier in front of her and he greeted Mrs. Lu with a grin. Lu Xingran asked him who he was and what he needed from her and realized that this stranger had very bad intentions. But then suddenly the courier took out a knife and, smiling, asked her what she thought. Why did he still come to her? Suddenly, the courier grinned evilly and told Lu Xingran that he wanted to finish her off and then get his reward. And after these words, the courier began to slowly approach Lu Xingran and she realized that things were bad and she didn't know who could help her. Lu Xingran didn't understand what was happening to her because her body didn't disobey at all and she could barely stand on her feet and could fall. Lu Xingran was thinking and thought that it looked like she had thrown Xiang Yang out in vain because now he could save her from this maniac with a knife. And then suddenly the courier said that Lu Xingran would now go to the next world and began to quickly run towards her with a knife in his hands. Lu Xingran covered her ears and began to scream with all her might and demand help, but she did not hope that anyone could help her. But then suddenly Lu Xingran's window shattered and the courier could not understand what it was and why the window accidentally broke. But suddenly, at that same second, Xiang Yang ran up to the courier and hit him with his knee as hard as he could right in the face and he was thrown to the side. The courier immediately collapsed on the floor and could not understand where this guy came from and how he struck him so quickly. Xiang Yang looked at Lu Xingran and smiled and greeted her and said that it was him again. She was very happy to see him. The courier told Xiang Yang that he left and swore under his breath all angry when he left there and he saw it with his own eyes. Xiang Yang told the courier that he couldn't even recognize his acting and also wanted to make a career as a maniac because it was too early for him. Xiang Yang said that his boots were polished to a shine and couriers delivered orders in the evenings and he should have at least gotten them dirty. Xiang Yang told him to say who sent him there and the courier said that no one sent him and he just ended up there by accident. The courier said that he knew nothing and was an ordinary courier and asked Xiang Yang not to hurt him and just let him go. But then suddenly the courier looked somewhere to the side for a second and thereby revealed to Xiang Yang that something was hiding there. Xiang Yang sensed something was wrong and immediately looked to the side and noticed that there was a surveillance camera upstairs. Xiang Yang was shocked by this and realized that they were being watched all this time and they knew about all their actions over all these days. The man at that time was sitting in the building and watching them on his monitor and he was very angry and dissatisfied that his man screwed up. The man immediately smashed the computer into pieces and said that everything had failed again and his worthless person could not cope with anything. It was the head of the Chinga sect named Ma Boan and he called his people a bunch of bastards and they could not finish off one woman. The girl next to Ma Boan called him her prince and asked him not to be nervous and calm down because everything could be solved. Ma Boan smiled and told her that it was good that at least she understood him and could always calm him down and come to his aid. And then Ma Boan looked at the two people and said that they promised to get him Lu Xingran, but one dude did them away. Ma Boan got angry and asked them what would happen if Xiang Yang continued to be next to her and how would he then get that very thing. And then the guy bowed to him and told Mr. Ma Bowen that he asked for his forgiveness and would try to fix everything quickly. They said that last time they screwed up, but they promised that this time it wouldn't happen and they would get him Lu Xingran in no time. Ma Bowen smiled and said that he would give them one last chance but added that if by chance they failed this time too. Suddenly, Head Ma Bowen crushed the thing standing next to him and said that if they fail, the same thing will happen to them. At this time, Xiang Yang continued to beat the lying courier and demanded that he answer all his questions. Xiang Yang demanded that this liar tell who his master was and whether he had other accomplices or whether he worked alone. The courier begged him to stop beating him and said that he would tell Xiao Yan the whole truth about his master and his illegal business. And then suddenly the courier saw some kind of red beam and was very surprised that he was speechless and just lay silently on the floor. And then suddenly the courier seemed to go crazy and started screaming and running around the whole room and could not find a place for himself in this world. Lu Xingran was very surprised by this and asked Xiang Yang if this courier had gone crazy because of his beatings or what happened to him. And then suddenly Xiang Yang realized what was going on and said that it was bad and immediately took Lu Xingran in his arms and quickly ran from there. And then suddenly there was a huge explosion there, and at that very second Xiang Yang and Lu Xingran managed to escape from this room and hide. Xiang Yan hugged Lu Xingran tightly to protect her from the blast wave, and immediately after the explosion, he asked her if she was okay. After that, all the police and firefighters arrived there and began to photograph everything there and find out the circumstances of this explosion. Chen Mengqin told Xiang Yang that they came to the crime scene for the second time because of him and said that he was involved in something. Xiang Yang smiled and told the commander that he had nothing to do with it and said that Lu Xingran simply attracted all sorts of maniacs like a magnet. Chen Mengqin was very angry and asked the impudent Xiang Li how he dared to slander the chairman's daughter and how he wasn't ashamed. But then Lu Xingran approached the commander and asked her not to be nervous and said that he was right, and besides, he saved her again. Xiang Yang smiled and told Lu Xingran that he saw how this explosion benefited her and now she has a headache. And then her man approached Commander Chen Mengqin and said that they had examined the entire apartment and found something interesting. The policeman immediately took some badge out of his pocket and told the commander that the criminal had this item with him. Commander Chen Mengqin froze in place after hearing such news, because she clearly remembered this badge and therefore was horrified by it. Commander Chen Mengqin now realized that the Qingma sect was involved in this matter and it was they who, without fear, caused the explosion. Commander Chen Mengqin immediately asked Xiang Yang to come to her for a minute if it was possible, and he was very surprised by this. The commander immediately pinned Xiang Yang against the wall and told him to confess how he was connected with the Qingma sect, but he did not understand what she was talking about. Xiang Yang wondered if she really thought that he was an agent of the Qingma sect and that he was actually a decent and good person. Xiang Yang was surprised and told the commander that he knew nothing about any Qingma sect and had nothing to do with them. But Chen Mengqin told him that this was the second crime in a row in which he was involved, and was it really a coincidence? Xiang Yang realized that they obviously needed Lu Xingran, but he promised her father that he would keep his mouth shut regarding the dragon's pulse. Xiang Yang agreed to tell the commander the truth and said that in fact he was a security agent and came to them from Beijing. He told her that he was at the crime scene both times because he was ordered to secretly guard Ms. Lu Xingran. Chen Mengqin listened to Xiang Yang completely and said that now everything was starting to come together and she understood his words. Xiang Yang told the commander that he could be called her personal bodyguard, although she herself did not know about it yet. Chen Mengqin thought that she seemed to be mistaken about him and that in fact he was not involved in these crimes. Chen Mengqin said that since this was so, it would be better for him to infiltrate her school and then he would be able to protect her from the inside. Xiang Yang was surprised and asked Commander Chen Mengqin how he could do this and thought that it was very difficult to accomplish. After that, Xiang Yang came to the number 1 school in Tianhai City and thought that he had already heard about this school and it was an elite school. Xiang Yang stood in shock and the head teacher of Dantung School showed him the room and said that now this will be his new workplace. Xiang Yang asked what he was talking about and told him that Lu Xingran told him that he would work as a physical teacher and what he was doing in the boiler room. Dan Ten asked Xiang Yang if he really thought that everything would be so easy and said that he didn't even know what kind of guy he was. Xiangyang thought that this head teacher was an unpleasant guy and wanted to harm him in every possible way and did not really answer his questions. Head teacher Dantong thought that Xiangyang was a goldfinch and he saw the way he looked at Lu Xingran and he thought that she was just his girl. And then suddenly Xiangyang heard someone screaming and asking for help not far from him and he thought who it could be. The girl stood next to some guys and told Zhang Likuan what he was doing with her and asked him to clear the way for her and let her through. Zhang Likuan told Kong Qingya what he did with her and said that she had refused him so many times and asked if she would be his girlfriend. Kong Qingya answered him and said that this would never happen and told him to quickly let her go if he didn't want problems. But suddenly Zhang Likuan swung his hand and said that she had become insolent and should be taught a good lesson and wanted to hit her with all his might. But then suddenly Xiangyang quickly ran to Zhang Likuan and immediately kicked him in the face with all his might and saved Kong Qingya from the attacks. Zhang Likuan crashed into a wall due to a strong blow and his friends asked his brother how he felt and whether he was injured. Xiangyang approached Kong Qingya and asked her to calm down and not be afraid and said that no one would dare touch her again. Zhang Likuan got very angry and asked Xiangyang who he was and said that he didn't know who he was contacting and ordered to call all the people there. Zhang Likuan looked at him menacingly and said that now he will answer for his actions and will beg him for mercy. And then his man named Dahui came to Zhang Likuan and he told him that it was this impudent Xiangyang who had just beaten him. Dahui asked Xiangyang if it was he who touched his little brother and said that if it was him, he should have been prepared for punishment. Xiangyang agreed with him and said that it was he who beat his friend and did not give him any chance in battle and he begged him for mercy. Zhang Likuan asked him not to pretend to be tough and said that his brother Dahui was a free warrior of the second rank and he would tear him apart. Xiangyang was surprised and asked him if he was a second-rank warrior and Dahui said, was he really scared now? And then suddenly Xiangyang said that he was very afraid of him and didn't know where to go and took out the first-rank champion belt from his pocket. Dahui suddenly became speechless and sat down on his knees. Zhang Likuan asked his brother what happened to him and asked him to get up. Dahui said that it was incredible and Xiangyang was the champion among the first-rank warrior and defended the title at least 10 times. Kong Qingya was surprised and said that Xiangyang had many awards and Dahui realized that given the number of titles he had, it was Xiangyang. Xiangyang developed his own fighting technique, became a champion at the age of 5, was an undefeated champion and the best among first-rank warriors. Zhang Likuan shouted at Dahui and asked him what happened to him and was he really scared of this weak and arrogant guy. But then suddenly Dahui hit Zhang Likuan and told him to close his mouth and asked why he was setting him up like that and what he wanted from him. Xiangyang turned to Dahui and asked if they would fight one-on-one or if they would attack him in a crowd and said that he was satisfied with both options. Dahui sat down on his knees and begged for mercy from Xiangyang and asked for forgiveness for not immediately recognizing him and asking him not to beat them. Xiangyang ordered him to stand up and said that this time he would spare him but asked him to be more modest and not attack weaker people. Dahui smiled at Xiangyang and thanked him and said that he would no longer offend anyone and, on the contrary, would protect others. And then Xiangyang approached Dahui and whispered to him that he was there on a secret mission and asked him not to tell everyone about him. Dahui agreed with him and said that he would not say a single word about him again and said that it was an honor for him to talk. Dahui asked his people why they froze there and said that they still had a lot of things to do and ordered them to quickly leave from there. Everyone agreed with Dahoem and quickly ran away from there and said that Xiangyang was indeed very strong and invincible. Kong Qingya exhaled and said that they had finally left because these people often bothered her and did not give her a quiet life. Kong Qingya told Xiangyang that if we count this incident, he had already saved her from these hooligans twice and she was grateful to him for that. And then suddenly Kong Qingya approached him and stood on tiptoes, kissed Xiangyang on the cheek and said that he deserved it. Kong Qingya smiled and told Xiangyang that he was her savior and she said that they would see each other again and began to leave this place. Zhang Likuan watched this and asked them not to even hope that he would leave them alone, saying that he would take revenge on them in the future. At this time, the head teacher told Principal Lu that he was telling the truth and asked him not to shield Xiangyang because he treated him politely. The head teacher said that he asked him to help him with the boilers, but Xiang beat his son and said that since he did it, he didn't see any limits. The head teacher said that Xiangyang did not have the necessary education or moral qualities and how could she take him to their school. And then suddenly Xiang Yang came in and asked the head teacher if he really had no education and morals and asked who had them at school. Xiang Yang said that he was interested to know what exactly the head teacher meant when he spoke about the education that suited them. The head teacher said that he was talking about an academic degree and said that all of their working teachers at least had a master's degree. The head teacher said that they had a degree from one of the best universities in the country, but his education column was empty. And did he graduate from school? Principal Lu Xingran asked Vice Principal Zhang to calm down and asked him to stop arguing with Xiang Yang and quietly solve the problem. Xiang Yang smiled and said that now he understood what he meant and said that he had not graduated from the best universities or the best schools in the country. The teachers were surprised and asked how he could work as a teacher at their school with such a background because it was a very serious place. The head teacher Zhang told Director Lu Xingran that he had not even graduated from school and how could he teach children, and demanded that he be fired as soon as possible. Xiang Yang asked them to stand and said that since he said that he had not graduated from a university or school, it did not mean that he was illiterate. Xiang Yang approached the director Lu Xingran and said that if they needed diplomas, he could immediately provide them with diplomas. Xiang Yang immediately put the diploma on the table and said that it was a diploma from Stanford University, Department of Physics, doctorate degree. Head teacher Zhang couldn't believe his eyes and wondered where this mediocre guy got a diploma from such a prestigious university. Xiang Yang placed all the diplomas on the table. These were diplomas from the Faculty of Psychology and the Faculty of Mathematics. Xiang Yang smiled and said that he also had degrees from Stanford University in History and Astronomy. Head teacher Zhang was shocked and, holding the diploma in his hand, couldn't believe how one person could have so many doctoral degrees. Xiang Yang said that he provided them with all the diplomas and said that if they had doubts about their authenticity, they could contact Stanford. Lu Xingran was also very surprised and realized that the diplomas were real, because she did not suspect that Xiang Yang was an intellectual. And then Director Lu said that everyone was convinced, and now she asked not to raise the issue of Xiang Yang's competence anymore. Lu Xingran said that regarding the reports of the beating of student Zhang Likuan, they had to conduct an investigation and the meeting was over. After classes, all the teachers and students went outside and Xiang Yang came up behind Principal Lu Xingran and asked to listen to him. Xiang Yang thanked her for covering for him and helping him get comfortable in his new workplace and save him from attacks from teachers. Lu Xingran asked Xiang Yang not to exaggerate and said that she did not cover for him, but just wanted everything to be fair. Lu Xingran said that especially since she knew the head teacher Zhang and her son too well, and if they got it from someone it was deserved. Xiang Yang was very glad that at least he wasn't left to blame there, and she didn't want to hit him or just kick him out of there. But then suddenly a car drove up to them at high speed and almost hit the old man there, and he miraculously managed to dodge. The old man started shouting at this driver and asked where he was going at such speed and told him to open his eyes. And then suddenly a guy came out of the car with flowers in his hands, and he stood silently in front of the old man for several seconds and did nothing. And then suddenly the guy shouted with all his might at the old man and told him to get out of his way and said that he was a rogue and a loser. Xiang Yang was very surprised to see such a guy and asked Lu Xingran who it was, and she wondered if it was Wang Chunming. And then suddenly a guy with flowers in his hands approached Director Lu Xingran and told her that they had not seen each other for a long time and he missed her. He gave Lu Xingran flowers and said that he gave her this bouquet of roses as a sign of his long-time love and asked her to just take them. Lu told Wang Chunming that it was only out of respect for his father that she still tolerated his harassment and thought that she was tired of him. Wang Chunming asked why she did this to him because he couldn't sleep at night because of thoughts about her and thought about her all the time. Wang Chunming asked Lu Xingran not to reject his feelings because he loved her, and immediately he began to get closer and wanted to kiss her. But suddenly Xiang Yang grabbed Wang Chunming by the lips and told his friend that it was his girlfriend and asked what he wanted from her. The students asked if they had heard this and said that it turns out that Director Lu met with Xiang Yang and that was the news. It now became clear to the students why she stood up for him so much, and they said that it was a pity because now they had no chance. Lu Xingran got angry and told Xiang Yan that he was back to his old ways again and asked him to remember that she was not his girlfriend. Xiang Yang asked her if she really wanted Wang Chunming to continue to pester her and not give her a quiet life without him. Xiang Yang whispered in Lu Xingran's ear and said that he was offering a deal. he could have saved her from this fool and she should have stopped making noise at him. Xiang Yang continued to hold the impudent major by the lips and he asked him to remove his hands so that he could free himself because he had been standing like that for a couple of minutes. Xiang Yang immediately let go of this fool and told Wang Chunming to behave more modestly and not pester and flirt with his girlfriend. Wang Chunming got angry and asked Xiang Yang what he thought of himself and why on earth he declared himself the boyfriend of the beautiful Lu Xingran. Xiang Yang said that if he didn't believe him, he could have looked there and suddenly he immediately kissed the director of this school, Lu Xingran. All the students froze in surprise and couldn't believe that they were dating because they had already kissed in front of the whole school. Xiang Yang hugged Lu Xingran and asked Wang Chunming if he was convinced that they had a serious relationship and were a couple. Wang Chunming couldn't believe it and was very offended and angry and said that Lu Xingran was only his girlfriend forever. But then suddenly Wang Chunming swung his hand and called Xiang Yang a bastard and said that now he would end his life and send him to the next world. But then suddenly Chunming fell in front of Xiang Yang and Xiang Yang was scared by this and asked what happened to him after all. Lu Xingran said that it was bad and said that Wang suffered from epilepsy and apparently he had another seizure. Lu Xingran asked to call an ambulance, but Xiang Yang said that he was afraid that they would not arrive in time, but he needed urgent help. Xiang Yang asked the students if anyone had a needle or something sharp and said that he urgently needed it now. And then Chinga said that she had something similar and this was a hairpin made of silver and it should have fit. Xiang Yang quickly started to warm up this hairpin and said that he had one idea to save this poor guy. Xiang Yang asked Lu Xingran to hold him and said that he would do the rest himself and try to save him in this way. But suddenly, when he wanted to help him, someone asked Xiang Yang what he was doing with this guy who had cool connections. The man said he was the son of Mr. Wang, a member of the school's board, and if he harmed him, he would be in huge trouble. Xiang Yang asked the man not to worry and said that he studied acupuncture and knew what he was doing and could help this guy. But suddenly the man got angry and told Xiang Yang that he didn't care about all this and said that he was a doctor there and knew his business. And then the man shouted at his assistant and asked why she was standing there and she should rather drag Xiang Yang out of there. The nurse immediately approached Xiang Yang and asked him not to interfere and said that the doctor could take care of the patient himself. She began to drag Xiang Yang away from there and said that if she didn't do this, he would swear at her again. The doctor said that now there are arrogant young people and they could watch a couple of videos on the internet and think that they know everything. But then suddenly Wang Chunming began to come to his senses and the students asked the doctor to look at it and said that teacher Xiang saved him. The doctor was very surprised by this and could not believe his eyes. He thought how it was possible because Xiang Yang was self-taught. Wang Chunming began to slowly get up and said that he was still dizzy. The doctor couldn't understand how he did it. And then Chinga approached Xiang Yang and told him that he again bravely saved a person and was her hero and had golden hands. Xiang Yang smiled at her and said that it was just trifles and he himself was glad to help the guy in a difficult life situation. But suddenly Wang Chunming turned to Xiang Yang and said that because of him he had an attack and he would answer him for it. Xiang Yang only smiled in response and asked Wang Chunming for me to be nervous and said that this crime could suddenly happen again. Wang Chunming was very angry with Xiang Yang and wanted to answer him for such words so that he would know who he had contacted and he was scared. But the doctor asked Wang Chunming to take care of himself and said that now it was best for him to return home and just rest. The doctor and nurse began to carry Wang Chunming to the car and finally he told Xiang Yang that they had not finished their business yet. Xiang Yang exhaled and said that finally this idiot got out of there because his head was already starting to hurt from his endless chatter. Lu Xingran told Xiang Yan that since he helped her get rid of him and kept his promise for this good deed, she invited him to dinner. Xiang Yang couldn't believe his luck and wondered if it was true because he thought that it all seemed to him and was a dream. Afterwards, Lu Xingran, Xiang Yang and Chinga went to a nice restaurant to unwind after a rough start to the day. Chinga looked at the food in this restaurant and said that everything there looked very tasty and she wanted to try all the dishes. Chinga said that it was very cool there and she had never been to such places and thanks to them she visited this restaurant. Xiang Yang told her that this was one of the best restaurants in the city and asked her to eat more to gain strength and be cheerful. Chinga whispered in Xiang Yang's ear and said that after all, the director invited only him to dinner and maybe she shouldn't have gone there. Xiang Yang said that it was nonsense and he saved him only thanks to her hairpin, and Director Lu simply did not have time to thank her. But suddenly, after these words, Lu Xingran hit Xiang Yang on the leg with all her might and hinted that he should talk less. Xiang Yang was very surprised by this, and he was in a lot of pain, and he realized that he had said more than he should have said and got his due. Xiang Yang wanted to tell Lu Xingran that he loved her very much, but she interrupted him and asked him to eat his food before everything got cold. Unexpectedly, at this time in the restaurant, people were watching them and were happy and said that it seemed like luck had smiled on them today. The man held a photo of Lu Xingran in his hands and asked his partner to look at who was sitting at that table. The girl saw her and said that it looked like the fish itself had forgotten in the net, and said that Lu Xingran was now on their hook. And then suddenly a girl came up to their table and brought them champagne, but Xiang Yang was surprised and told her that they didn't order it. The girl said that the thing was that on the occasion of the anniversary of their establishment they gave a bottle of champagne to all couples. But suddenly a man said that there was no couple there because there were 3 people sitting at this table and it looked strange. Lu Xingran listened to this, and the man said that it looked like one of them didn't have enough guy and they had to divide him between each. People said that they had no shame or conscience, and one of them even looked like a schoolgirl, and they said that the rich had lost their shame. But suddenly Kong Chinga also heard about it and immediately stood up and told all the people that everything was completely wrong. Kong Chinga told the woman that they had a healthy teacher-student relationship and said that she should have apologized to them. But then the woman was surprised and told the schoolgirl had she really lost her fear, and brazenly demanded an apology from her and said that she would now receive. And then suddenly the woman grabbed Kong Chinga by the hair and said that she was a bad girl and didn't her parents teach her any manners? But then Xiang Yang stood up and walked towards the woman and told her to quickly unhook from her, otherwise he would now punish her for this act. At this time, the girl stood behind Lu Xingran, and Xiao Li's accomplice told her that everything was ready and he was in a good mood. Xiang Yang approached the man and took him by the scruff of the neck and asked if he understood his mistake, and he asked him for forgiveness and said that he understood everything. The woman at that time was sitting on the floor and sobbing because she got hit in the face by Kong Chinga because she didn't want to let her go. Xiang Yang hugged Kong Chinga and asked what kind of people they were, and they didn't even let them sit and eat their dishes normally. And then suddenly Xiang Yang turned around and was shocked because when he was distracted by those people who were laughing at them, he forgot about Lu Xingran. And suddenly he didn't find her in his place, and only her wallet remained there, and she herself disappeared from there and seemed to have evaporated. Xiang Yang got angry and told Kong Chinga that he was only distracted for a second, and the director disappeared and said that it was better for her to return home. And then grandfather approached Xiang Yang and said that he recently saw Lu Xingran go with these waiters towards the kitchen. Xiang Yang thanked his grandfather for such necessary information and quickly ran out of the restaurant to save his beloved Lu Xingran. And then suddenly, when Xiang Yang was on the street, he saw that some strangers had put Lu Xingran in the trunk of a car. The stranger ordered his people to move faster and said that they looked like turtles and were of no use. Xiang Yan shouted and called Lu Xingran and asked her not to worry or panic and said that he would immediately save his sweetheart. Lu Xingran lay in the trunk and thought that it was all over and now no one would come to her aid and people would kidnap her forever. But suddenly Lu Xingran heard Xiang Yang's familiar voice and was happy and realized that not all was lost yet. The strangers immediately stood in front of Xiang Yang, and their leader ordered his men to detain this fool who thought that he was stronger than them. Xiang Yang immediately quickly climbed over the high fence and then began to quickly move towards these scoundrels to teach them a lesson. Xiang Yang quickly ran up to them and jumped and began using his signature technique. The robbers looked at this and froze in surprise. Xiang Yang immediately delivered a powerful blow with his hand to the face of one of the bandits and said that he really thought that he could defeat him. Xiang Yang approached the second bandit and kicked him in the face with all his might and said that now he felt his strength and power. The kidnappers lay unconscious on the ground, and Xiang Yang said that now they will never forget who they contacted today. And then suddenly Xiang Yang noticed that one of the bandits had already managed to get into the car and drive away with director Lu Xingran. Xiang Yang got angry and said that these freaks will still get what they deserve and he will punish them all for such a vile and cowardly act. After this, Xiang Yang immediately called Commander Chen Mengqin and said that Lu Xingran had just been kidnapped by some strangers. Xiang Yang gave the number of the car in which she was taken away and asked her to quickly contact the traffic police and watch the cameras. Commander Chen Mengqin couldn't believe her ears and asked how this could happen and what these people wanted from her. Chen Mengqin told Xiang Yang that she understood him and asked him to come to the department and, having found out something, they would go together to save her. Xiang Yang listened to her and said that he understood everything and would immediately come to the department and help her in this criminal investigation. Xiang Yang immediately quickly got into the car and rushed at top speed to the department because he wanted to help Lu Xingran as soon as possible. Xiang Yang quickly got to the department and asked Commander Chen Mengqin what happened there and what information she could find. Chen Mengqin showed him the navigator on the tablet and said that they had identified them and the kidnappers were in an abandoned warehouse. The commander and Xiang Yang said that they would go there together right away and deal with these brazen kidnappers and save Lu Xingran. At this time, the head of the Qingma sect, Ma Bowen, called his people scum and mediocrity and said that they were good for nothing. Ma Bowen was angry and told his people that they should have caught her themselves, but as a result the hoteliers did it for them. And then a man approached Ma Bowen and said that they had a little trouble on the way, but he could be calm. And then suddenly the man threw Lu Xingran with all his strength to the ground and said that it was very difficult for them to kidnap her from the restaurant. And then Ma Bowen came up to Lu Xingran and touched her chin and said that he finally got what he wanted all this time. Ma Bowen began to remove the tape from her mouth and said that he had long wanted to meet her and she could say what she thought about him. Lu Xingran was angry and asked Ma Bowen who they were and why they kidnapped her and what they wanted from her. Ma Bowen took out a knife and smiled and said did she really ask why they stole her and said that her father was to blame for this. Ma Bowen said that it was better for her to ask her father about all this, because why did he hide the dragon pulse in his daughter? Lu Xingran was very surprised and asked the sect leader what kind of pulse he meant and what kind of nonsense he just told her. But suddenly Ma Bowen began to move his knife closer and closer to Lu Xingran and he clearly liked such actions and was very happy. Lu Xingran got scared and started screaming and asking for help, but no one heard her in this long-abandoned warehouse outside the city. Head Ma Bowen smiled and told Lu Xingran that she would not have long to suffer and promised her that everything would end very soon. And then suddenly, when Ma Bowen wanted to approach Lu Xingran, a huge explosion was heard in the warehouse and the head of the sect flew up from the explosion. Ma Bowen was surprised and thought what it was and who could have caused an explosion there because they were alone there and there was no one. And then suddenly a silhouette began to appear in front of the head of the sect and he asked Ma Bowen how he thought who it could be. And suddenly Xiang Yang appeared in front of the head of the sect and said that now Dad was in the building and they could be horrified by his appearance. Ma Bowen stood up and told Xiang Yang that his father was there alone and it was him and said that now he would fill him with lead like a pig. After this, the head of the sect began to shoot at Xiang Yang without stopping and thought that now this impudent person would quickly go to the next world. But suddenly Xiang Yang started dodging bullets and called the sect leader a moron and asked him to first learn to shoot accurately. Ma Bowen froze in surprise and was shocked. He thought about how it was possible and how fast he was. After that, Xiang Yang quickly ran towards the sect leader and continued to dodge his bullets and move to different corners. Xiang Yang ran to Ma Bowen and immediately hit him in the face with all his might and said that this was punishment for their brazen kidnapping. Ma Bowen immediately fell to the ground and thought that this guy was not only very fast but also very strong and powerful. After that, Ma Bowen stood up and thought that it was very difficult to defeat Xiang Yang and he began to think about a plan of action. And then suddenly Ma Bowen's gaze fell to the side and he realized that this was his chance and he had to use this opportunity. Next to him lay tied up Lu Xingran and Ma Bowen, looking at her, came up with an idea and now he could cope with Xiang Yang. Xiang Yang immediately realized that things were bad and asked Lu Xingran to be careful because he knew what the sect leader wanted to do. Ma Bowen immediately pressed Lu Xingran to him and pointed a gun at her and said that now he wanted to look at the actions of the hero. Ma Bowen smiled and told Xiang Yang that his kung fu was useless and said that if he moved, he would finish her off. Lu Xingran cried and asked Xiang Yang to save her because he was her last hope for salvation and saving her life. Xiang Yang got very angry and looked at the head of the sect brutally and said that he better not have touched her and now he will regret it. Commander Chen Mengqin was standing near the warehouse at that time and asked her people to be ready to be captured because Lu Xingran's life was in danger. And then suddenly one of her people asked the commander to look up, and they noticed that there was a helicopter standing there and waiting for someone. Commander Chen Mengqin was surprised and thought who it could be, and judging by the helicopter she was a very influential person. Ma Bowen stood next to the helicopter and said that the gun always defeated Kung Fu and asked them to happily stay there on the roof. Lu Xingran asked Xiang Yang to save her, and he looked at the head of the sect and thought that he was a vile and weak person without any honor. Ma Bowen told Lu Xingran that he was already very tired of her screams and told her to stop screaming, and immediately pushed her with all his strength. From such a push, Lu Xingran flew to the side and fell to the ground, and she was in great pain from such a fall on hard concrete. Ma Bowen smiled and said that the games were over and pointed the gun at Lu Xingran and said that now they will meet in hell. Lu Xingran lay on the ground and tears involuntarily rolled out of her eyes because she realized that her end was close and she was hurt. Xiang Yang was very scared for Lu Xingran and immediately ran towards her with all speed and said that he would now protect her from a bullet. And then suddenly a shot rang out, and Xiang Yang thought that it would all end like this because he still had so many plans. The bullet began to fly rapidly to reach the target, and Lu Xingran came to terms with her death and was ready to die. And then Xiang Yang quickly ran to Lu Xingran and, falling to the ground, pressed against her with all his might to protect her from danger. But unexpectedly, this shot was fired not by Ma Bowen, but by Commander Chen Mengqin, located below, several tens of meters from there. Suddenly, Chen Mengqin hit the hand of sect leader Ma Bowen with a shot, and he was in great pain and thought how it was possible. The commander ordered all her people to go after them and asked them not to let these scoundrels escape and punish them according to the law. After these events, they returned home, and Xiang Yang asked the doctor how Lu Xingran felt and if anything had happened to her. The doctor said that she was fine and had a few abrasions, and that was all, and she was not seriously injured. But the doctor said that Lu Xingran needed to be well looked after in the next couple of days and wished them health and left from there. Xiang Yang told Lu Xingran that it was his fault that he allowed this to happen, but she thanked him for saving her from danger. Lu Xingran said that this time if it weren't for him, she wouldn't know where she would be now, and he had already saved her so many times, but she didn't appreciate it before. Xiang Yang told her that it was nothing and said that it was already late and he wanted to leave her to rest and gain strength for the future. Xiang Yang said goodbye to her and wanted to leave the house, but suddenly Lu Xingran grabbed his hand and asked him to stand and listen to her. Lu Xingran looked at Xiang Yang with embarrassment and asked if he could stay with her for the night because now she needed support. Xiang Yang was shocked and wondered if she really wanted him to stay with her, because in the past, on the contrary, she always wanted to kick him out of there. Xiang Yang said that he was happy to help her, and then suddenly he wanted to lie down next to her to give her the support she needed. But Lu Xingran was very surprised by this and said what else had he come up with and why was he such a naive idiot. Lu Xingran threw a pillow at him and said that she was just scared to be alone, but that didn't mean that he could behave like that. The next morning, Xiang Yang stood in the school stadium and he could not start the day cheerfully because he really wanted to sleep for the rest of the day. Xiang Yang yawned and thought that he would finally be rewarded for all his heroism, but as a result, he received nothing for these good deeds. Xiang Yang remembered that last night Lu Xingran asked to stay at her house and she immediately fell asleep, but he could not sleep in this house. Xiang Yang thought that he should have stopped thinking about it and it was time for him to start the lesson despite his sleepiness and fatigue. Xiang Yang looked at the students and asked them to stop chatting and create deathly silence because he couldn't even hear his own thoughts. Xiang Yang immediately approached the students and said that their lesson had already started and asked why they were still making so much noise and sitting idle. The students said that they didn't care about him and his words and asked if he really thought that if he was a physical education teacher, he would be such a cool guy. Xiang Yang noticed a familiar face and said that it was him again, and apparently life had not taught him anything and he sensed that it would be fun with him. Xiang Yang ordered everyone to listen to him and said that it didn't matter to him who their parents were, even the head teachers of the school, but there had to be discipline in his lesson. Xiang Yang warned the students that anyone who does not stand in line will run 10 laps without stopping around the stadium. The head teacher's son started laughing and said that Xiang Yang was a clown, and did he really think that he would run just because he said so? Xiang Yang approached the student and said that then they would run together, but for every 2 laps they would need to run only 1. Zhang Likuan told the teacher that it sounded very intriguing and thought that the teacher would die in this stadium and lose. After that, Xiang Yang continued to run and asked the guys to push him and said that by this time he had already completed his 80th lap. Zhang Likuan and others sat on the ground and thought that they would spit out their lungs because during all this time they had run 10 laps. All the students supported the teacher and said that they had a very hardy physical teacher and told Xiang Yang that they loved him very much. Xiang Yang continued to run and thanked the girls for such support and said that now he needed their help. And then Kong Qingya came up to him and asked that he was probably very tired and said that she had brought him water and Xiang Yang was happy about it. All the students gathered near Xiang Yang and said that they could stretch his shoulders and he thought that he had not been surrounded by such love for a long time. At that time, Zhang Likuan was sitting alone on the sidelines and thought that this nasty teacher had taken all the attention and it made him angry. Zhang Likuan thought that these stupid girls were sticking to this teacher like flies in the first lesson and Xiang Yang really pissed him off. And then suddenly Zhang Likuan took a stone and threw it with all his might at teacher Xiang Yang and said that now he would not want to smile like that. But unexpectedly, Xiang Yang very easily knocked off this stone with his finger without any problems and sent the stone in the opposite direction to the sender. And then suddenly a stone collided directly with Zhang Likuan's head and he clearly did not expect such an answer and immediately fell to the ground. Xiang Yang told the students that it was time for them to start the main part of the lesson and today he would show them a couple of self-defense techniques. The students lined up in a row and began practicing their skills. Xiang Yang approached the student and asked her to relax her shoulders a little. The student told Xiang Yang that she really liked these classes and asked the teacher if she was now doing everything correctly. And then suddenly all the students gathered in front of Xiang Yang and asked him to look at their movements and tell them if everything was correct. But suddenly Xiang Yang heard a familiar voice saying his name and thought that this was clearly not good. And then suddenly Director Lu Xingran appeared in front of Xiang Yang and said that head teacher Zhang was in the hospital and asked him to come with her. Suddenly, the son of the head teacher, Zhang Likuan, heard their conversation and stood up and asked the director Lu Xingran what happened to his father. They quickly arrived at the hospital and Lu Xingran told Xiang Yang that head teacher Zhang did not like him and asked him to be prepared for anything. Zhang Likuan also quickly arrived at the hospital and, opening the door, asked the nurses what happened to his beloved father. The head teacher Zhang was lying in the ward and his wife was sitting next to him and sobbing non-stop. Xiang Yang was very surprised to see this sight. Xiang Yang asked the head teacher's wife what happened to her husband and whether someone beat him because he was interested in finding out about it. The woman told Xiang Yang that all this happened because of him, because Zhang was walking down the street and swearing at him and they heard him and this is the result. Head teacher Zhang walked down the street and said that Xiang Yang was a bastard and set him up in front of the school and he will soon pay for it. Zhang said how could he know that Xiang Yang studied at Stanford and because of him he looked like a complete fool in front of the director. And then people heard about this and asked Zhang if he really knew Xiang Yang and the head teacher asked them what their business was and told them to go. But suddenly these people took out their bat and began to beat the head teacher Zhang and his wife was surprised and did not understand why they did this. The woman told Xiang Yang that he crossed someone's path and they decided to take it out on her husband and it was very unfair. Xiang Yang realized that judging by the description it looked like thugs from the Chinga sect and he realized that it was not safe for them to stay there. And then Xiang Yang told Lu Xingran that it was time for them to leave there and she asked Xiang Yang if something had happened again. And then Xiang Yang went out into the corridor and noticed a sleeping man in a hat there and he had an idea that he decided to use. Xiang Yang quickly walked up to the man and took his hat from his head and thought that they would really need it in such a situation. Xiang Yang put his hat on Lu Xingran's head and asked her to be quiet and not make any sounds in order to quickly escape from there. They began to slowly leave the hospital but suddenly this man was not really sleeping and immediately signaled for his partner. And then suddenly a girl in a hospital gown appeared in front of Xiang Yang and Xiang Yang asked Lu Xingran to stop there and wait. Xiang Yang wondered if this man was awake, and then suddenly the man and his partner quickly moved towards Xiang Yang. The unfamiliar girl immediately jumped and wanted to strike Lu Xingran, and apparently she was good at martial arts. But suddenly Xiang Yang stood in front of Lu Xingran and repelled the stranger's blow and realized that she was a very fast fighter. Xiangyang grabbed the stranger tightly by the leg and the man looked at it in surprise and wondered how Xiangyang managed to grab his partner. And then Xiangyang threw this stranger at the man with all his might and they fell to the ground together and realized that Xiangyang was strong. The woman landed on her accomplice and realized that it was very uncomfortable for her to fight in these clothes and she was in the way. And suddenly, when she took off the medical gown, Xiangyang was very surprised and wondered if these strangers were ninjas. And suddenly, when the woman whistled, a whole group of ninja mercenaries in white masks appeared and stood behind the woman. The woman called her people idiots and asked why they stood idle and did they really want to get punished by the boss. The ninja woman ordered her people to quickly catch her Xiangyang, who gave them a good rebuff at the beginning of the battle. Xiangyang realized that things were bad and he told Lu Xinran that they had to quickly escape from there if they wanted to survive now. At that time, Zhang Likuan was walking in his father's room and thinking that he would definitely find the culprits and they would pay for it. And then suddenly Xiangyang and Lu Xinran burst in and the younger Zhang was surprised by this and asked what they were doing there. Xiangyang grabbed Zhang Likuan and told him to shut up and said that it was a long story and he would explain everything to him later. Xiangyang hugged Lu Xinran and Zhang Likuan and they asked what he was up to, but he silently walked towards the window. And suddenly Xiangyang jumped out of there and his friends couldn't believe that he still decided to jump out of there. Zhang Likuan cried and told Xiangyang that he was crazy and besides, his parents remained upstairs in the room. Immediately after this, all the ninjas burst into the room along with the head and said that they were there and should not have missed them. But the man looked out the window and said that Xiangyang left them again and they again failed in the mission and that was bad. The woman told the ninja man that there were too many people on the street and asked him to leave them and catch them next time. The ninja woman said that this guy was very smart and strong, and besides, he fought with her on equal terms and even defeated her. The ninja smiled and said that it was worth admitting that this Xiangyang surprised her very much and at the beginning she did not expect anything from him. At this time, Xiangyang, along with Lu and Zhang, ran several kilometers and Xiangyang asked Lu Xinran if she was okay. Lu Xinran said that everything was fine and thanked Xiangyang for helping her in a difficult moment and getting her out of the hospital. But Lu Xinran said that she hurt her leg a little when she ran without looking back in a hurry from the hospital. Her leg hurt. Xiangyang asked her to give him a leg and said that he would just look at her injury and try to help her if he could. Xiangyang took her leg and noticed that there was a serious abrasion on her leg and he realized that it looked like she had hit herself very hard. Lu Xinran screamed and said that it hurt her when he touched her sore spot and asked him to be careful. Xiangyang asked her not to worry and said that he would now massage her leg with salt, of course she wouldn't mind. Lu Xinran agreed with him and said that she was ready to do anything if only this pain would disappear and she could walk normally. Zhang Likuan watched this and wondered if Xiangyang wanted to please Lu Xinran in such a strange way. Lu Xinran thanked Xiangyang for his kindness and said that the pain was slowly starting to disappear and it was great. But Lu Xinran asked Xiangyang to tell her why everyone wanted to kill her and what kind of thing it was called Dragon Pulse. Zhang Likuan was very surprised and asked if they were talking about the pulse of the dragon and said that he was very interested in this topic. But Xiangyang pushed Zhang Likuan in the face and asked why he stood there and eavesdropped and said that it actually didn't concern him. Xiangyang wondered when Lu Xinran managed to find out about the dragon's pulse and thought that it was too early to bring her up to date. Xiangyang told Lu Xinran that the dragon pulse was a complex topic and said that he would tell her everything in detail later. Xiangyang said that now all she needed to know was that he was there to protect her and Lu Xinran listened to him and did not ask questions. At this time, Ma Bowen was at home and he was in a very bad mood and he told his people that they were stupid. Ma Bowen pointed his finger at the woman and said that besides, she was from the ninja clan and she was of no use. The girl told her prince that they had already sent so many killers for Lu Xinran, but she left them every time. She asked maybe they should change their strategy and said that Xinran was looking for sponsors for her school and had an idea to contact her former classmates. At the same time, Xiangyang and Lu Xinran were walking along a shopping street and Xiangyang asked her what alumni meeting she told him about. Xiangyang told her that such things were usually planned and asked why this time everything was planned so unexpectedly. Lu Xinran said that she didn't know why they did this, but she had a great opportunity to attract new sponsors. Lu Xingran suggested that Xiang Yan go and buy him clothes to match the place where they all met together. Xiang Yang froze in place and began to study the girls walking there and realized that there were a lot of people on this shopping street. Xiang Yang noticed that there were a lot of beauties shopping there who, in many cases, bought unnecessary clothes for themselves. Xiang Yang and Lu Xingran went into a branded clothing store and passing girls flirted with him and asked the handsome guy if he would add them as friends. But then Xiang Yang's attention was distracted by Xiang Yang and she asked him what he was doing there in the corner alone and asked him to come over. Lu Xingran found a great suit for him and asked him to try on these clothes and said that they would suit him perfectly. Xiang Yang went into the fitting room and thought that this suit really suited him perfectly and Lu tried to choose the best. Xiang Yang changed his clothes and then suddenly he appeared in front of them in a beautiful suit that suited him perfectly and he was handsome. Lu Xingran was surprised and said that it was very good because she didn't expect such formal suits to suit him. Lu Xingran came up to him and said that she would straighten his tie and belt and said that then he would look like a gentleman. The saleswoman and Lu Xingran began to adjust his clothes and measure his sizes and he realized that this was a very good clothing store. Xiang Yang was very surprised by this and could not believe his eyes that there were so many girls around him and he really liked it. But suddenly Wang Chunming appeared there and said that he couldn't believe that they were walking along the same path and he didn't understand what he forgot there. Lu Xingran got angry with him and told Wang Chunming that it would be a good idea for him to wash his mouth with soap and clean his dirty tongue. Wang Chunming told the girls next to him that Xiang Yang was a typical homeless person and asked if he was right and they laughed at him. Wang Chunming started pointing his finger at Xiang Yang and asked everyone to look at his miserable appearance and besides, he put on a brand jacket. Wang Chunming laughed and asked Xiang Yang if he had enough money for such clothes and said that he was a beggar and a homeless person. But suddenly Xiang Yang quietly tripped Wang Chunming and he began to lose his balance and fall straight to the floor of the store. Wang Chunming fell to the floor and Xiang Yang was glad that this fool had finally shut up because all he smelled of was negativity and dirt. Xiang Yang smiled and asked Mr. Wang if he should have taken this as an offer to pay for his clothes. And then his girls ran up to Wang Chunming and asked their sweetheart if he was okay and if he had suffered from such a fall. Wang Chunming was angry with Xiang Yang and said that this was the second time he had made him feel ashamed and set him up in every possible way. After that, Xiang Yang went to the cash register and handed her a VIP card and said that he would take all the clothes and said that the service was excellent. Wang Chunming continued to shout at Xiang Yang and asked him how he dared to ignore him and said that he would get what he deserved. The cashier was very surprised to see such a bank card and thought that influential people with such a card did not often come to them. Wang Chunming thought that because of this scoundrel he submitted for the second time in front of all the people and thought that he would not forgive him for this. And then suddenly Wang Chunming screamed with all his might and called the guards there and said that he wanted to punish that idiot Xiang Yang. The guards immediately approached Wang Chunming and asked what happened and he ordered them to beat this guy properly. The guards agreed with Mr. Wang and said that they would quickly deal with this impudent person and get Mr. Wang. Wang Chunming said that the owner of this boutique was a friend of his father and they could even kill him there and no one would know about it. And then all the guards wanted to pounce on Xiang Yang and Lu Xingran clung to him and did not want them to harm Xiang Yang. But then suddenly a girl appeared there and ordered everyone to stand still and asked who dared to misbehave on her territory. Wang Chunming was very surprised by her appearance and wondered why Mrs. Du Yenyu appeared there and what she needed in the boutique. Wang Chunming approached Du Yen and said that Xiang Yang was to blame for everything and he was violent and besides, he brazenly stole his things. Lu Yenyu looked at Xiang Yang and was very surprised because he reminded her of one of her old acquaintances and she thought. Lu Yenyu wondered if it was the founder of the Xiang school and wondered why he came to the boutique and what his goals were. Lu Yenyu thought that this could not be because Xiang Yang had this card and he looked exactly like the founder of the Xiang school. And then suddenly a woman approached Xiang Yang and introduced herself and said that it was she Lu Yenyu and didn't he really recognize her? Xiang Yang was surprised by this and did not understand who this Lu Yenyu was because he had never met her before and suddenly he remembered. Xiang Yang remembered that as a child he lay at home and Lu Yenyu looked after him and was his nanny and he remembered her. Lu Yenyu loved him then and asked him to let his sister kiss him because he was very cute but Xiang Yang was against it and was angry. Xiang Yang's mood immediately dropped and he thought where she came from and now all he needed was her to be happy. And then suddenly Lu Yenyu hugged Xiang Yang and asked if he was happy about this or very happy to see his old friend's sister. But then suddenly Lu Xingran pulled Xiang Yang by his ear and angrily asked him who this woman was and what he had in common with her. Xiang Yang smiled and told Lu Xingran that this woman was like an older sister to him and she was very surprised that he had such a friend. Wang Chunming froze in surprise and couldn't believe his eyes and wondered if this freak really knew Lu Yen herself. And then Wang Chunming began to leave from there and Lu Yenyu stopped him and asked little Wang where he was going and told him to stand. She said that this shopping center was built by Xiang Yang's mother's company and he accused him of being a thief and causing this scandal. Wang Chunming was surprised and realized that this Xiang Yang was a bigger major than him and it looks like he was wrong about him in the beginning. Wang Chunming told Ms. Lu Yenyu and said that it was a misunderstanding and he was just joking with them, they were friends with him. Lu Yenyu ordered Wang Chunming to quickly run away from there and not appear in her sight and get out of this shopping center. Wang Chunming said that he understood the lady and quickly ran away from there and he was glad that Lu Yenyu did not order her people to punch him in the face. After that, Xiang Yang and Lu Xingran came to the Tandu Club and Lu Xingran said that what happened in the shopping center was cool. Lu Xingran said that this Lu Yenyu is her heroine and asked if he saw how scared Wang Chunming was when he saw her. Xiang Yang said that Wang Chunming was lucky that she suddenly appeared there and said that otherwise he would have dealt with him himself and would not have let her offend. Lu Xingran said that he was a hooligan and there was a good atmosphere in the club and all the people stood there and talked to each other. But suddenly a man was talking on the phone and asked his interlocutor, Mr. Ma, not to worry and said that they were already there. The man looked at her and said that Lu Xingran would not run away today and he promised Mr. Ma that he would take care of it himself. The girl approached Lu Xingran and said that she was shocked because she had a very handsome boyfriend and she was even jealous of him. She asked Lu Xingran where she found such a handsome man and said that he was dressed and looked like a decent gentleman. The girl approached Xiang Yang and asked the handsome guy if everything was serious with Lu Xingran and how they met. People said that this guy was very lucky and not only was he a major, but he also grabbed the most beautiful girl in their school. People said that they were even ashamed to admit it, but they were jealous of him because they also wanted to date such a girl. Wang Chunming also stood there and got angry and thought why everyone everywhere admired this Xiang Yang because it was very unpleasant. And then suddenly Wang Chunming froze in place when he saw a man sitting in a chair and immediately walked up to him and greeted Mr. Du. Wang Chunming told Mr. Du that it was a pleasant meeting and he did not expect to see him there and said that they had a lot in common. But Mr. Du got angry from the annoying Wang Chunming and asked what he needed from him and why he came there. And then it dawned on Wang Chunming that he seemed to have made a mistake by suddenly approaching Mr. Du himself and getting on his nerves. Wang Chunming told Mr. Du that today he suddenly learned that Manhwa shopping center was built by Xiang Yang's mother herself. Wang Chunming told Du that he immediately remembered that his company also participated in the tender for its construction and he probably lost a lot of money by losing the tender. Wang Chunming asked Mr. Du if he wanted him to help him take revenge on Xiang Yang and Mr. Du was surprised and asked what he meant. At this time, all the people talked to each other and had a good time and said that the holiday was a success and it was cool. Xiang Yang stood with Lu Xingran and told her that she was right about him needing to buy new fashionable clothes. But then suddenly someone called Lu Xingran and she turned around and saw her friend there and thought what she needed. But then suddenly the girl dropped her glass and put all the contents on Lu Xingran and heavily stained her clothes. Lu Xingran was shocked by this and thought that her clothes were completely ruined and the stain could not be hidden in any way. The girl apologized to Lu Xingran and said that she was such a bungler and didn't do it on purpose and her hands were just shaking. Xiang Yang asked Lu Xingran if everything was fine and she said that everything was fine but she needed to go and change her clothes. The friend told Lu Xingran that it was her fault and therefore offered to walk her to her room like a real friend. After that, Lu Xingran went to the top floor with her friend and she was very ashamed in front of the guests for this random incident. Xiang Yang watched them and thought that there was still something strange in the behavior of Lu Xingran's friend and it bothered him. A friend showed Lu Xingran the corridors of this building and said that the service there was at the highest level and they had comfortable rooms. A friend brought her to the room and said that they had arrived at their destination and asked Lu Xingran to make herself at home. Lu Xingran entered the room and suddenly froze in place in surprise and realized that in fact her friend had blatantly deceived her. In this room were Wang Chunming along with Mr. Du, and Wang told Xingran that they had not seen each other for a long time and he missed her. Lu Xingran was shocked by this and turned around and wanted to ask her friend why she did this to her and shamelessly deceived her. But suddenly the girl immediately sprayed Lu Xingran in the face with some kind of spray and her eyes began to hurt and she could not open them. Wang Chunming and the girl stood over Lu Xingran and smiled, and she was in pain and realized that she was burning all over. Mr. Du told Wang Chunming that he helped him get this beauty and asked him to be careful with her and not harm her. Wang Chunming was very happy about this and Lu Xingran asked him to listen to her and not do stupid things that he would later regret. Wang Chunming asked her why he needed to listen to her and said that now he didn't want to listen to anyone and be weak. Lu Xingran remembered Xiang Yan and thought that now she needed him more than ever and she would be glad to see him there. But suddenly Wang Chunming and Mr. Du heard some noise and wondered what was going on in the corridor and why it was so noisy. And suddenly Xiang Yang appeared in front of them, breaking the front door and telling Wang Chunming to take his hands off his girlfriend Lu Xingran. Xiang Yang began to slowly approach them and Mr. Du realized that this guy was very strong because he broke the door with one blow. Wang Chunming was very surprised to see his recent offender Xiang Yang and asked him how he managed to find them in this room. Mr. Du immediately threw out his cigarette and said that now he would deal with this guy himself and began to gradually approach Xiang Yang. Xiang Yang told Mr. Du to let the innocent girl go, but he said that he wouldn't do that and suddenly swung his hand to hit him. Unexpectedly, Xiang Yang easily dodged his blow and thought that this Mr. Du was very slow, like an old tortoise. And then Xiang Yang grabbed Mr. Du by the scruff of the neck and said that he should have fulfilled his request on time and now he will regret it. And then suddenly Xiang Yang threw Mr. Du with all his might and said that this would be a lesson for him that he should not offend a cute girl. Mr. Du could not do anything about it and began to fly away from such a throw and screamed and begged people for help and salvation. Mr. Du jumped out of this room and landed right next to his people and could not get up because he received a strong blow. Mr. Du's people were very surprised and thought what could have happened there, that their boss was thrown several meters. The guards approached Mr. Lin Du and asked if he was okay, and the rest of his men quickly ran to that room. The administrator of the establishment watched this and could not understand what was happening there and why such noise was coming from there. The administrator assessed the situation and thought that she should have called the police so that they could restore order there and calm down all the people. A few minutes later, the police quickly arrived there and surrounded the building and wanted to begin the assault if everything did not calm down. At this time, Xiang Yang had already dealt with Lin Du's people and began to approach Wang Chunming, and he asked him not to approach and said that he would scream. Xiang Yang got angry and asked Wang to tell him what Lu Xingran did to him and that he wanted to treat her like a vile coward. Wang Chunming said that he just wanted to have fun with Lu Xingran and asked if he needed any reasons for this. Xiang Yang became even more angry at these words and asked Wang Chunming what he just said to him and whether he thought about the words. And suddenly Xiang Yang immediately clenched his fist tightly and wanted to strike Wang to finally shut up this vile scoundrel without honor. Wang Chunming was very scared by this and asked Xiang Yang what he was going to do with him and said that it was illegal to beat people. Xiang Yang smiled and asked if it was true and wanted to hit this coward who wanted to stop him with the help of the law. But at that moment, Commander Chen Mengqin suddenly appeared in the room and pointed a gun at Xiang Yang and told him to stop. Commander Chen Mengqin asked Xiang Yang what he was doing and asked him to stop doing it and just sit down and calm down. Xiang Yang asked the commander what she was talking about and how she ended up there. Wang Chunming thought that he would definitely be imprisoned now. And then suddenly, when all the people in the room were distracted, Wang Chunming wanted to escape from there and began to quickly climb out through the window. Commander Chen Mengqin was surprised by his actions and ordered her men to quickly follow him and never miss him. Xiang Yang also wanted to run and catch up with Wang Chunming and prevent him from escaping, but suddenly Lu Xingran stopped him and held his hand. Lu Xingran told Xiang Yan that she was very scared and asked him not to leave there but to help her by providing mental support. Xiang Yang was very surprised by this, but Lu Xingran did not want to let him go and held him tightly so that he would not run away from there. Lu Xingran came closer to him and asked him not to leave her there alone and said that she couldn't trust anyone except him. Xiang Yang said that he could not do this because that scoundrel Wang Chunming could hide somewhere and never appear anywhere else. But Lu Xingran begged him to stay and said that she felt very bad and asked him to help her in a difficult moment of her life. Xiang Yang's demons told him to listen to this girl and stay there alone with the beautiful lady and not think about any problems. But Xiang Yang's angels asked him to remain a gentleman and said that he had to help her and deal with the situation. Lu Xingran asked Xiang Yang to quickly come to her for support and asked what he was waiting for and why he was so frozen in place. But Xiang Yang told her that it was wrong and he respected her very much and could not approach her because he had unfinished business. And then suddenly Xiang Yang hit Lu Xingran in the face to bring her to her senses, and it looks like she lost consciousness from this blow. Xiang Yang sat next to her and hoped that he did not knock her out, and she did not feel the force of this sudden blow so much. Xiang Yang sat and thought about today's events and thought that the day had been quite difficult in the morning and he was already tired by this time. And then suddenly his phone rang and Xiang Yang realized that it was Commander Chen Mengqin calling, and he immediately answered her. Commander Chen Mengqin asked Xiang Yang to come to the station and said that they had caught Lin Qingnan and wanted to interrogate him. Afterwards, in the interrogation room, Chen Mengqin interrogated Mr. Lin Du and asked him to answer questions honestly and quickly. The commander asked Lin Qingnan what connected him with Ma Boan, and Lin asked what she had to do with it and said that he knew nothing. Commander Chen Mengqin said that she checked their correspondence and she and Ma Boan planned it together and asked if it was true. But Lin Qingnan called the commander a fool and asked if she was afraid for her life while working with such influential people. But suddenly Chen Mengqin was surprised and squeezed the paper in her hand and asked Lin Qingnan who he just called a fool. The commander was very angry and wanted to attack him and said that she would tear out his tongue, but her people asked her to calm down. Commander Chen Mengqin pushed her men away and advised Lin Qingnan to confess everything himself before she punished him. Lin Qingnan was very calm and asked the commander if she really threatened him and what she wanted to achieve with such threats. But then suddenly one of the captain's men burst into the room and told her that they were in trouble and he had to report it. The commander asked him to wait and asked if he didn't see that she was busy and didn't have time for other things. But the employee asked the commander for forgiveness and approached her and said that the head of the department had just informed him about this. Chen Mengqin listened to him and froze in surprise and asked if the head of the department said that she should have let this scoundrel go. Mr. Lin Qingnan was happy to hear such news and simply smiled slightly at all the police officers and thought that everything was already clear. At this time, Xiang Yang was sitting in the corridor of this building and was waiting for Commander Chen Mengqin and wanted to hear good news from her. Xiang Yang was already tired of waiting for the commander and thought how long he could wait for her and what they did during the interrogation for so long. And then suddenly Commander Chen Mengqin appeared behind him and asked Xiang Yang how long he had been waiting and whether he was tired. Xiang Yang said that everything was in order and asked the commander how the interrogation went and whether Lin confessed to his crimes. Chen Mengqin said that this time she miscalculated and in the middle of the interrogation his lawyer appeared and they had to let him go due to lack of evidence. Xiang Yang was very surprised by this and said that Lin Qingner was clearly associated with the Qingma sect and should not have been released under any circumstances. Commander Chen Mengqin asked him to calm down and said that everything was under control and she knew how to face him. The commander took a piece of paper out of her pocket and handed it to Xiang Yang and said that it was Lin's car number and asked him to follow him. Chen Mengqin asked Xiang Yang not to miss him and said that she was sure that he would lead him to the organizer. At this time, Lin Qingnan was driving a car and said that these policemen were completely insolent and gave him harsh interrogations. Lin Qingnan exhaled and calmed down and said that if his lawyer had come an hour later, the commander would have finished him off. The driver was listening to his boss, but suddenly he distracted him and told the boss that he had to urgently warn him about something. And then suddenly the driver said that someone was chasing them and was chasing them on a bicycle, and it was strange because he even caught up with them. Lin Qingnan was very surprised by this, and looking out of the window he was surprised because Xiang Yang was chasing them and wanted to keep up with them on a bike. Xiang Yang quickly pedaled and said that no matter how much they ran from him, but now they would never throw him off their tail. Xiang Yang was worried about only one thing and hoped that the bike would not let him down at the most inopportune moment in the midst of the chase. Lin Qingnan started shouting at his driver and asked if he could have gone faster and said that even a guy on a bike was catching up with him. The driver stepped on the gas and began to drive much faster and break away from the pursuer, who did not want to stop. Xiangyang shouted and ordered them to stand and thought that it would be very difficult to catch up with them since his legs were starting to get tired and it was difficult for him. Xiangyang continued to chase them and said that they had to answer before the law for their crimes and be punished. The driver told the boss that it wasn't safe to drive fast on these streets, but Lin said he didn't care and they had to get away from him. Xiangyang watched Lin Qingnan drive his car quickly and thought that he didn't seem to care about people's safety. They continued the chase and arrived at a pedestrian street where there were a lot of people and they were walking along the narrow streets and were in no hurry. And then suddenly Lin Qingnan's car appeared in this street and turned sharply into an alley and almost hit ordinary innocent people. And then suddenly the driver stopped the car and told the boss that they could not go further since it was a very busy street. Lin Qingnan immediately got out of the car and called the driver a fool and said that he was fired for not obeying him. Xiangyang continued to drive after them and once there he realized that along such a busy street he could only run. Xiangyang immediately threw down his bike and began to run and chase Lin Qingnan and told him to stand and surrender to him before it was too late. Lin Qingnan ran away from him among the crowd of people and pushed them and ordered everyone to get out of his way and not get in his way. Lin Qingnan turned around and saw Xiangyang and wondered when he would get tired because he had chased him for several kilometers and was not tired. Xiangyang thought that now he would definitely catch this scoundrel because he had nowhere to go and he had driven himself into a corner and did not know about it. But suddenly at that moment, Xiangyang heard a familiar voice asking to buy cold snacks and thought that it was not good. Chinga stood on this street selling cold snacks and said that only she had the freshest snacks. And then Xiangyang shouted to her and asked Chinga to leave there now and asked her to be careful and look around. Chinga heard a voice and wondered if teacher Xiangyang was there and she wondered what he was doing on this street. Chinga saw Xiangyang's teacher and was happy. But suddenly Lin Qingnan realized that this girl was Xiangyang's acquaintance. And then suddenly Lin Qingnan ran up to Chinga and ordered her to go to him and grabbed her and said that now she would not run away anywhere. Xiangyang was very worried about her and thought that Lin Qingnan would be even more of a bastard because Chinga was a child and was not to blame for anything. Chinga screamed and asked for help, and Lin Qingnan grabbed her by the neck and told Xiangyang that if he came near him, he would break her neck. Xiangyang was angry and told Lin Qingnan that he was a freak and now he will not feel sorry for him and he feels all the pain from his blows. All the people passing by were watching this and they were wondering what was happening there, but they did nothing and stood and watched. But then suddenly, when Lin Qingnan was distracted by conversations, Chinga came up with a way to get out and bit him on the hand. Xiangyang immediately ran up to Lin Qingnan and asked Chinga to bend down and immediately delivered a powerful blow to the bastard's face. Lin Qingnan immediately fell to the ground and Xiangyang asked Chinga how she felt and if she was okay after this. Chinga started crying and told Xiangyang that she was scared but he asked her not to be afraid of anything and said that he was next to her. Lin Qingnan stood up and thought how this impudent person dared to hit him, but realized that Xiangyang had a strong blow that he received. And then suddenly Lin Qingnan ran away from there and told Xiangyang that he would regret meeting him and would remember him in the future. Xiangyang told Lin that he could run away, but soon they would meet again and then they would find out who would regret it more in the future. After that, Xiangyang and Chinga went into the cafe and she thanked the teacher for saving her from this impudent scoundrel. Chinga told the teacher that she didn't expect to meet him today and also on this street she was on. Xiangyang said that it was just a coincidence and almost forgot and asked her why she worked there and didn't tell him about it. Chinga told the teacher that her mother was sick and she really needed money for treatment, so she tried to earn it. Xiangyang realized that Chinga was a very good girl and at such an early age she already wanted to help her parents financially. And then the waitress came up to Xiangyang and said that his egg tofu was ready and wished him bon appetit and a good day. And when she put the plate down, Xiangyang was surprised and thought why the egg tofu was cut in this way and it was strange. Xiangyang thought that this was the first time he had seen tofu cut so finely and realized that not a single cook in their country had done this. And then suddenly Xiangyang looked at the waiter and asked her to stand and not go anywhere and said that he had a conversation with her. The waitress stopped and asked the distinguished guest if he needed anything else because she could bring anything. But then suddenly Xiangyang took a plate of tofu in his hands and threw it at the waitress, and she just smiled back at him and was surprised at this. The girl immediately dodged him and the plate flew into the wall and broke into pieces while she stood still and looked at Xiangyang. And then Xiangyang realized that poison had been placed in his food, and Xiangyang told the waitress that he thought that they had already met somewhere. The waitress was actually a ninja girl, and she told Xiangyang that he was a sharp-eyed and smart guy, just like she expected. Xiangyang looked at Chinga and said that it was better for her to leave now, but she said that her workday was not over yet. But Xiangyang smiled at her and asked her not to worry and said that he himself would settle this issue with her superiors and she would not have problems. Chinga agreed with the teacher and asked him to take care of himself and be careful because these ninjas were the best mercenaries. Xiangyang looked at the ninja girl and said that before she always worked with her partner and asked where he was now. And immediately after these words, suddenly a dagger began to fly at Xiangyang from behind, and he was very surprised by this and became seriously wary. But suddenly Xiangyang turned around and immediately grabbed the dagger, and the ninja were shocked by this and thought that it was difficult to do. A male ninja appeared there and said that it was worth admitting that Xiangyang had excellent reactions and phenomenal skills. Xiangyang said that they would do without kind speeches and ordered them to tell who sent them there and for what purpose. The ninja girl smiled and told Xiangyang that he didn't need to know about it and asked him not to ask about it. And suddenly the ninja and his accomplice immediately decided to attack Xiangyang and said that he would soon die at their hands anyway. Two mercenaries wanted to finish off Xiangyang, but he defended himself from their blows and thought that they would never be able to defeat him. And then suddenly a ninja man ran up to Xiangyang and struck with his sword, but Xiangyang quickly dodged his blow to the side. Xiangyang thought how tired of these two he was and realized that it was time for him to end with them because they always got in his way and got in his way. But suddenly at that moment Chinga came into the cafe and brought law enforcement officers with her and asked them to look at those two over there. The ninja girl was surprised and asked Xiangyang who these people were and where they came from and wanted to interfere with their battle. The ninja man told the accomplice that there were too many witnesses there and they needed to get out of there so as not to go to jail. The ninja immediately threw smoke grenades and disappeared from there in a second, while Xiangyang looked at it and could not understand what happened there. And then all the people were surprised by this and thought, did these ninjas just disappear from there and evaporate in the air without leaving a trace? The law enforcement officer asked Xiangyang where they could have disappeared and thought that they would still have time to catch them later with preparation. Chinga ran up to Xiangyang and asked him if everything was okay with him, because she was very worried about him and could not calm down. Xiangyang said that everything was fine with him and asked Chinga herself how she felt and whether she suffered from these events. Chinga said that it was their luck that these valiant agents were nearby and immediately agreed to help her. Xiangyang was very happy and patted Chinga on the head and said that she was very nimble and he didn't expect that she was like that. Xiangyang thought that he was very sorry because he had already hoped that this time he would find out where the members of the Chinga sect were hiding and deal with them. The agents searched the cafe in hopes of finding evidence, and the male ninja looked at them from outside and said that he was very sorry. The male ninja said that he had already hoped that this time they would deal with Xiangyang forever, but they failed to do so. The ninja girl asked the master to let her follow Xiangyang and said that she should have had a chance to get rid of him. The master agreed with her but said that Xiangyang was very dangerous and asked her to be careful, and she said that she understood him. After a hard day, Xiangyang returned home and thought that today was a very eventful, unforgettable day. Xiangyang thought that the day had already passed and he still didn't really learn anything, and it was a shame because he didn't even know who the ninjas worked for. And then Xiangyang remembered the words of Commander Chen Mengqin that she called him trash and said that he was of no use. Xiangyang realized that he was very tired and could use a good sleep, and then suddenly a ninja began to sneak up on him from behind. The ninja girl quickly ran up to Xiangyang and wanted to strike him with her daggers and finish him off once and for all. Xiangyang smiled and realized that the fish seemed to have taken the bait, and he knew from the very beginning that his enemies would be waiting for him at home. The ninja swung her daggers in front of Xiangyang, but he dodged her blow without any problems and thought that it was predictable. And then suddenly Xiangyang responded to the ninja with his blow and hit her on the head with his foot, and from such a strong blow she fell to the floor. Xiangyang pressed the mercenary's girl and said that she was caught and told her to tell her now who sent her there to finish him off. The ninja girl resisted him and said that she would not tell him anything and he could end her life because she was ready for it. Xiangyang didn't even think about letting her go and told her not to twitch and said that he could easily fulfill her wish and send her to the next world. Xiangyang ordered her to quickly tell everything she knew, and the ninja realized that Xiangyang was too strong and she could not get out. And then suddenly Lu Xingran came to his house and called Xiangyang and asked if he was there because she came to visit him after today's events. Xiangyang thought that it was very bad and not now. Lu Xingran should have come to him at the most inopportune moment. And then suddenly Lu Xingran turned on the light in his house and asked Xiangyang what he was doing and what he was doing at home in the dark.